We see the threats against writers. The woman in Seattle who had to go underground changed her name because she had a proposal to draw a Muhammad cartoon on Facebook. The writers of a book for Random House were a writer for the book on for Random House about the prophet's wife was destroyed. The book itself, all 10,000 copies were burnt because the publisher said, we're afraid of getting bombed. In Yale University Press, they pulled back a book that was about the Danish cartoons. We see what's going on. Our First Amendment is being destroyed. Number two, we see these groups emerge and infiltrate the media. The New York Times, for example, should be registered as a foreign agent for Saudi Arabia, as far as I'm concerned. They are the biggest booster for the Ground Zero Mosque in New York City. Never once investigating the imam's radical statements that blames the United States for 9/11, that supports Hamas and Hezbollah, and that believes that Islamic terrorism is the sole product of American aggression. This is the imam who pretends to be moderate on CNN, and yet behind closed doors says a lot of other things. This is the imam whose narrative that the Americans are responsible for the war against Islam is the same narrative that has motivated every single one of the 139 Islamic terrorists arrested since 9/11 and plots to blow up parts of the United States. That narrative that America is at war with Islam, which is totally false, incentivizes them to become a jihadist, and then they declare under the tutelage of other jihadist leaders like Anwar al-Awlaki, Osama bin Laden's people, that they will avenge this war against Islam. This notion that somehow we are responsible is the one is the one reason why we are affected and afflicted with radical Islam from Atlanta, Tampa, Chicago, Tucson, where Al-Qaeda was founded, Culver City, where Hamas was founded, Seattle, where Al-Qaeda had a camp, Miami, where Hezbollah has a money laundering center. I could name 100 cities today where there are activities of radical Islamic groups. And the reality is that many of them survive because we don't take them seriously, or they have embedded themselves into the political fabric that they are protected, or that they engage in self-jihad. They say one thing publicly, but another thing behind the scenes. So I think it's imperative that we all understand that this is the major threat we face. The major threat we face today is not from the radicals belonging to other other terrorist groups, but rather belonging to Islamic extremist ones. They believe they will take over the United States. You may not believe it, and we may think it's totally irrational, but what they believe is what counts. I'll end with a story that I think is emblematic of the problems we face. There was a man named Abdurrahman al-Amoudi, president of the American Muslim Council. He was the most respected moderate in the United States between 1990 and 2003. And in 1990, he was welcomed into the White House. In 92, there are pictures of him with Bill Clinton and Al Gore. He entered into the halls of the CIA. He was sent abroad by the State Department. He was welcomed in by the FBI. But for the last 7 years, prior to 2003, he was secretly a member of Al-Qaeda and Hamas. And I actually wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal in 1996 calling him a member of Hamas, but it was ignored. And then we taped him at Lafayette Park in the year 2000 yelling support for Hamas and Hezbollah. Again, it was ignored. And then we taped him in Jordan in 2001 calling for bombings in the United States on a mission sponsored by the State Department. And finally, in 2004, he was arrested at Heathrow Airport because they found $340,000 in cash in his suitcase. And by the way, when he was asked where the money came from, he said he didn't know. He found it outside his hotel room, which means we should all stay at the Intercontinental in London. He was sentenced to 23 years for a plot, an Al-Qaeda plot to assassinate leaders of Saudi Arabia. Here was a man who was a key member of Hamas, of Al-Qaeda, and welcomed into the highest corridors of the political echelons in American society. He did it because of self-jihad. He has compromised all of our institutions, all of our secrets. In fact, all of the military chaplains, Islamic chaplains in the military today were named by him, and they are still in power also. In New York State, there are 110 Islamic chaplains for the 90 state prisons. Of those 110 Islamic chaplains, 90 of them are under investigation for terrorism activities. That's just one state. I'm giving you these examples because the public needs to know about this. The mainstream media does not advertise this. If I had a tape here, I would show you and play for you exactly what goes on behind closed doors, because we have informants and infiltrators that go into these organizations that tape record and video exactly what is said. And it is absolutely shocking. And you will be able to watch a 2-hour video of a documentary that I'm coming out with in January called The Grand Deception, Jihad in America. So I want all of you to know we face a dilemma that we never asked for. We face a war we never initiated. It's a war they initiated. Unfortunately, we have an administration that refuses to even utter the term radical Islam, let alone recognize it as a strategic threat. They removed it from the annual strategic threat that the military puts out. This is a war that is not going to be ended quite soon, but it's a war we can win. It's a war the West can win because we have values, we have goodness, we have the right of essential morality on our side. We know what's good. We have Judeo-Christian values that have been embedded in our culture. We know what's wrong. We know what's right. The reason 68% of the American public oppose the Ground Zero Mosque is not because of racism, as Time Magazine would tell you. It's not because of bigotry, as the New York Times would tell you. It's because they recognize that that is hallowed ground, and the sensitivities of the 3,000 people who were killed, murdered, executed, should be remembered and never, never forgotten. And that is the lesson I bring to you today. Winston Churchill, in 1938, when he saw the workings of Adolf Hitler and the beginnings of Adolf Hitler's conquering of Poland and Czechoslovakia, said, "Democracies act only when there's blood in the streets." Well, I'm here to tell you that we are going to change that. We're going to act when there's no blood in the streets. And it depends on all of us getting involved, fighting the good war, electing the right people in Congress, in the Senate, so that the Senate and the House come back to the right owners this fall. Amen. So I want to tell you, I commend you all for coming tonight. I commend my other speakers, Michael Medved and Hugh Hewitt, who are wonderful heroes of mine. They have been preaching the right message all along, and these are the people that are going to lead us out of the holy, out of the wilderness into the Holy Land of goodness, where Islamic extremism doesn't reign supreme, where we recognize the values of Judeo-Christian values and don't succumb to the political correctness that somehow Islamic extremism has to be accommodated because we are afraid of the threat of violence. That threat of violence can be defeated. We defeated the Nazis in World War II. We defeated the Japanese in World War II. It was a great American generation. And this generation, your generation and your children's generation, have no alternative. This is a war we dare not lose. Thank you very much.